Hi, I'm Phil Harbottle. This is my 14th video discussing 1950s British science fiction paperbacks. Now, in my earliest videos, I told how I discovered that two different authors, John Russell Fearn and E.C. Tubb, were both writing under the same pseudonym of Volsted Gridban, which was very puzzling at the time. So I set out to investigate how this came about. And it took decades of research before I finally uncovered the full story and laid the mystery to rest. In the autumn of 1952, Skyen were heavily fined for obscenity in one of their many degrading gangster titles. The directors argued about who should pay the crippling fine, eventually falling out and splitting into three splinter groups. Author payments were suspended, and Fearn found himself owed for 6 Vargo Staton novels: The Dust Destroyer, Black Wing of Mars, The Man in Duplicate, and 3 others. Now, in those days, he was owed about £300, but that would be worth over $35,000 today. He promptly terminated his contract and called in the Society of Authors to help him collect his debt. Having lost Fearn, their best-selling writer, Skyen were in trouble, but then they had a stroke of luck. E.C. Tubb was looking for a new publisher, having understandably broken away from Curtis Warren. This is covered in my video number 6. He submitted Alien Universe, unaware that Fearn had left Skyen. Skyen's editor, Maurice Reed, recognised Tubb as a major talent who could replace Fearn, and he rushed Alien Universe into print, creating a new byline of Volsted Gridban. He promoted Gridban, just see the blurb here. He promoted Gridban as Skyen's new find, ostensibly after a worldwide search for talent. And Reed invited more submissions and went on to publish Tubb's next 2 novels, Reverse Universe and De Bracy's Drug, all as Volsted Gridban. The books lacked Turner covers, but they had pretty good substitutes by way of George Radcliffe and John Richards. But the novels themselves were outstanding, all using a similar background of interstellar adventuring employing hyperspace travel, which Tubb was perfecting as his own template. But Skyen now faced a new rival publisher. Fearn had not been the only unpaid author, and a group of disaffected gangster writers banded together to form a new publishing company, Milestone Publications Limited. Skyen's editor, Maurice Reed, the man who had invented the Vargo Staton and Volsted Gridban bylines, jumped ship and followed them. Skyen's original founder, B.Z. Emanuel, left Skyen and formed his own new company, Gannett Press. Now, over at Milestone, the first thing that Reed did was to set about poaching Tubb and Fearn, who was now freelancing because Skyen had breached a contract. Tubb agreed to write for Milestone as Volsted Gridban, and Fearn agreed to write as Vargo Staton. And Reed also poached Skyen's new star cover artist, Ron Turner. Fearn had recently sold a new science fiction novel, Deadline, to the Toronto Star Weekly, the Canadian publication for which he was a regular contributor. This novel would normally have gone to Skyen after its publication, but Fearn agreed to switch it to Milestone instead, and he gave it a new title of Fugitive of Time for its book edition. But before the novel would be suitable for Milestone's format, Fearn would have to abridge it, cutting around 6,000 words. Now, Fern's success as Stanton was well known amongst other publishers, and once it became known that he was free of his binding contract to Skyen, he was inundated with science fiction commissions. He was asked to write novels for Curtis Warren, Hamilton and Company, and Pearson's, who were creating a new Tidbits science fiction library imprint. Fern had accepted all of the commissions he'd been offered, and he quickly wrote the two novels for Curtis Warren and 2 for Pearson's new Tidbits series. Collectors should note that the Curtis bylines, Shaw and Lorraine, these were the only 2 that were by Fern. All other Curtis books by Lorraine and Shaw are not by Fern. For Hamilton's, he wrote what was intended as the first of a new series under his own name, featuring a futuristic fixer named Simon Oscar Slade, nicknamed SOS. But by the time the first novel, Moons for Sale, had been written, Skyen Limited had recovered. They had sound financial backing from a former director, Lou Benjamin, who was determined to reclaim their best authors. Fern was quickly paid the outstanding sum he was owed, and he was offered pay in advance for his future work, 2 books a month. This was unheard of in those times, but Fern was now in the driving seat, and he renegotiated his contract to permit him freedom to write for any other publisher he chose, provided the books were not science fiction. I will see here 4 of the titles Fern went on to write for other publishers, 2 historicals and 3 splendid crime mystery novels. But Skyen, of course, would have exclusive rights to his science fiction. As before, the new terms were assimilated into his now revived old contract, which was set to run until November 1955. The condition of the new contract was that Fern had to withdraw Fugitive Time from Milestone and divert it to Skyen, and he also had to withdraw Hamilton's Moons for Sale. Skyen had taken legal action to prevent Milestone from issuing any books under the Vargo Stanton and Volsted Gridban labels. And going forward, they would now be exclusively used by Fern under his 2 books a month contract. But Milestone still had time before the Gridban embargo in which to rush out 2 new tube novels as by Volsted Gridban, with dynamic Ron Turner covers: Planetoid Disposals Limited and Fugitive of Time. Although Milestone had lost Fern's novel Fugitive of Time, they had already prepared and bought for it a Ron Turner illustrative cover. So they only needed to change the byline to Volsted Gridban and stick Tubbs' second novel between the covers. The fact that neither the title or the cover remotely matched Tubbs' story in any way did not worry a mushroom publisher. Now, here we see Fern's first 2 Skyen novels under his new contract. Fugitive of Time was now retitled as 0 Hour, and Moons for Sale was Fern's first Volsted Gridban titles. Both had Turner covers. Now, his 0 Hour cover used the same motif as the Milestone cover, depicting a clock face showing the time of 11:03, a critical plot twist in Fern's story being the predestined time of the hero Gordon Fryer's death. The time of his death was 11:03. Both 0 Hour and Moons for Sale had French editions, There we see the French editions published by Anticipation for the Staten and the Gridban novel. And they also had later graphic novel editions. See here, adapting the Gridban story to comic strip format. Excellently done. And 0 Hour, being an outstanding story, was recorded 2 graphic novel interpretations, completely unabridged. Veteran science fiction fans will have realised that Turner had taken his inspiration for his milestone cover from the famous silent movie classic Metropolis. Here we see a 1970 magazine I was the editor of at the time, July 1970, and this began a series discussing classic science fiction films with stills from them. And here we see, let's see, it's G. Wells, not the longer one. Oh, here we are, Metropolis. You can see here that Turner took his inspiration from Metropolis. The chap wrestling with the pointers on the cock, trying to stop them reaching a certain time. Obviously took his inspiration from that. Now, those who remember my first video will appreciate that 0 Hour was the novel my best friend Ian Dick had described to me in 1954 before I discovered science fiction novels. It retains a special place in my heart and memory for that reason, and also because my friend Ian died tragically young in a fatal motorbike accident only a few years later. Eventually, I was able to arrange for Fern's novel to be reprinted by Wildside with the newly recreated Turner cover matching his original, and restoring Fern's title and issuing it under his own name, and also restoring all Fern's missing text that had been cut from the first book edition, making this a unique edition. I dedicated the book to Ian Dick, to the memory of Ian Dick, someone who had changed my life and to whom I owe my entire professional literary career. Volley, old friend,